Thorns is a 1967 novel by Robert Silverberg, science fiction novel, which is it's a short book. It's more of like a Twilight Zone episode, I'd say, in full effect, than a novel. Put this down. It's Duncan Chalk, a media mogul, also psychic vampire, brings together Minner Burris, a astronaut who has visited an alien planet where, against his will, he was surgically altered, changed into a horrific being with his eyes changed sideways and his mouth changed sideways, and his skin is different. It's he can't be punctured, and it's smooth, and his limbs are hinged. He's been turned into a freak, and he brings Minner Burris and Lona Kelvin, a 17-year-old girl. Minner Burris is probably in his 40s. Lona Kelvin is a 17-year-old girl who volunteered or was coerced or something or another, 17, 16, I don't know exactly where you get consent there, of to harvest her eggs and produce 100 children. And so she is another freak. She is known for being the virgin mother of 100 babies. And he brings them together because he knows that they're going to be horribly unhappy together, and he'll get to suck off all their pain, while at the same time exploiting them in some kind of a media frenzy of basically filming everything and documenting everything and exploiting them that way. To get them to do that, he promises Minner Burris that he's going to somehow do a brain swap, and that Lona Kevin, he's gonna get her 2 of the babies so that he can raise them himself. Both of the two, both Minner and Lona, have both been completely broken by their experience. Some ways I can see why Burris is. I mean, he's really been completely misshaped. He's in constant pain. His body is so hinged that he can't even really. He has trouble moving if he doesn't concentrate. He's truly. He can't go anywhere without being stared at. He's truly a freak that way. So I can see how that would kind of wear on somebody. It would break them down. He's basically become a recluse by the end of the start of the novel. Lona, on the other hand, she's tried to commit suicide a couple of times. Silverberg doesn't really do a great job of showing sort of why this has had this effect on her, other than maybe massive media attention. Though perhaps it's because this is written in 1967. It doesn't seem to really give a feel of like all the outside eyes peering in on them. Silverberg isn't really good at. He's good at capturing their internal states, but the idea of a kind of a media frenzy or anything like that really is absent from the novel. In a lot of ways, Duncan Chalk, as this evil Machiavellian figure, he's not really very present in the novel. And the only times when you kind of hear about his presence is he has little discussions with his flunkies, or they suddenly feel weak after an argument, and it's like he's been sucking their energy. But he can do this from a great distances, apparently amazing, mind-boggling distances. But he doesn't have to be there present, so it makes for rather oddly detached that way. Lona is this very waifish, wan character. She's basically kind of very childlike. There is very much that feel of, Minner Burris is this very kind of self-assured, he's a man's man, and he was an explorer before, so he's super put together that way, and he's like, now he's less than an Adonis. He's a freak. He views himself as a freak, so, but why he would ever be romantically attracted to this 17-year-old girl to begin with, I guess, talks more about the ideals of, what men might find sexy, of this childlike girl who's not really bringing much to him as she's written, which is really, it makes for their so-called kind of romance and their break apart, that I didn't really care about that, and not to give away, how things resolve, but it doesn't, I never felt like this is a real relationship, or this was anything that was tragic or anything. It was very, very much an intellectual exercise. And Silverberg is he's an elegant writer. This apparently was Thorns is sort of marks a transition from him being kind of a pulp writer to becoming a more serious writer of kind of more kind of interesting themes and stuff like that. As a result, this has kind of got that literary fault of like nothing much happens in the way of action. There's not much dramatization in this book. Duncan Chalk pays for them to go on this kind of all expenses tour where they kind of squabble and are unhappy with each other, and that's basically all that happens. And they sometimes feel weak, but it's like this could have almost been like a short story versus a kind of a novella or very short novel that it is. So it's kind of unsatisfying that way. How it resolves in the end, there's another character who sort of tells one of them what's going on, and that's how they figure out, oh, this is what's going on, and then they go and resolve it. And yeah, it wasn't the science fiction is a thing of ideas, but it's best when they can kind of they use the science fictional elements to dramatize things. And I mean, Duncan Chalk is a psychic vampire, so this is the time in the 60s and 70s when science fiction novels would have psychics and have mind control and telepathy, which is basically just magic. But there's this brief period here where there's speculation this could actually be a scientific thing, but it's not. It's just it's nothing that you can actually extrapolate from technology or from anything of brain science. Maybe quackery. Brain science at the time is where they got all this stuff from. So as a science fiction novel, I don't know if it works that well. As a literary novel, I guess it's got some ideas, though I do have a problem sort of with the themes of, in that they consider themselves freaks, and there's this just like, there's no kind of question that they could ever integrate into society, or that society should, maybe change itself, or that they could hold out hope that society would kind of look past all this stuff, which I don't know. It's just like it didn't wrestle with it. I mean, I can totally see, people are going to stare. People are always going to stare at stuff that's different. People are always going to fear about what's different. But I think there's ways that you can kind of educate and explore that and sort of turn the lens back on this media. And this book, saying that like the media aspect of this book wasn't really brought to the fore. It was never felt like it was present. It was always too invisible. There wasn't like enough like of an implication of the audience. And I mean, I suppose as a reader, I am the audience. But I found this reality show really kind of boring in a lot of ways, despite Silverberg's quite lovely language and his allusions. He's a very elegant writer. He's someone I might try again, but this book in itself, I can see it's sort of a start of him on a literary thing. I don't know if this is going to be, he goes more literary up his butt, and I don't find it that interesting. He definitely suffers from the female characters in the book. The Lona being this 17-year-old waif character was very unengaging, and I think the only other major female character I can think about is Elsie, who's a widow of one of the other fellow astronauts that went with him to the planet. They got killed. He came back, and she suddenly is like in love with him and wants to be with him and stuff like that. And it's just another like super pathetic female character, and it's like, well, great, you're surrounded by pathetic characters. It doesn't make your main character feel all that more interesting or alive, or enrich them, or make them challenged, or make get for a deeper novel. So it definitely handicaps this novel. And I would hope maybe in later books there's more interesting female characters. It's interesting. Silverberg is probably well known for being the person who was talking about James Tiptree Jr. and saying, "Oh, this is an amazing author. He writes. He's a man's man. He's obviously someone who's like, really gets men because he's a man's man." And it turned out no. James Tiptree Jr. was a woman writing under a pseudonym, and yes, he got a little bit of egg in his face for that. But he just happened to be the lucky fellow of the time, because I'm sure all fellows, including if I happened to be at that time, would have probably fallen into the same trap. But he was the lucky fellow who fell into that, got egg on his face. So that's unfortunately where he might be better known now as that. I mean, he's obviously known for he's obviously known for his many books, and I shouldn't dismiss him right out of hand. I'm probably just saying that this book in itself wasn't really for me. So yeah, that's my review of Thorns by Robert Silverberg. More videos later.